Merlin Lucifer is the strongest demon king in history, but after causing too much damage, he fell into debt, and the elders fired him. Now he is forced to earn money in the human world. The story begins with a war between demons and humans outside the Pride Demon King's palace. Lilith, Merlin's younger sister, overcomes the knights with her charm magic, making them fight each other. However, the kingdom's 233rd hero, Alice, charges at her and makes her fall. The battle between Lilith and Alice continues. Lilith has the upper hand, but she is surprised when her whip breaks upon contact with Alice's holy sword. At that moment, Alice rushes Lilith and successfully captures her. Inside the palace, Merlin is writing his weekly report, but he can't focus because of the battle right outside. The sage with Alice summons a giant whale monster. As he launches his ultimate attack, Merlin suddenly arrives and accidentally lands on top of Alice. When Alice tries to fight him, he sends her flying with just a flick of his finger. Merlin remembers the sage begging for mercy in their last battle. The sage explains that isn't true. He draws magical energy from all his soldiers and fires an energy beam. Merlin counters it with a single sword slash that splits the monster in an instant. Merlin then unleashes a second slash, annihilating the entire human army and cleaving the ground around them. Suddenly, Merlin hears a bell that makes him panic as he realizes the weekly meeting has started. At the meeting, they are all disappointed in Merlin because he has the worst performance of all the demon kings. They explain that every time he goes into battle, he causes serious damage to the land of darkness, so his total debt has reached 6,666 trillion demon coins, and they demand he pay it immediately. Merlin tries to sneak out of the palace, but Lilith suddenly appears. Merlin explains that he must go to the outside world to heal his curse, which shrinks his heart if he doesn't kill strong opponents. Lilith wants him to stay, but he would have to pay 6,666 trillion for all the damage he caused if he stayed. Lilith quickly jumps back and encourages him. Upon reaching the seashore, Merlin is unsure how to cross. He realizes his attack was too strong and damaged all the ships, but a small boat suddenly floats towards him. At that moment, he sees Alice being chased by a wolf monster about to pounce on her. He stops the monster and tells it to return, claiming Alice is his. He then carries her to the boat. Alice tries to resist, but Merlin is no match for her, and he tells her to start rowing. Alice begins to row without rest, thinking of getting her revenge one day. After some time, Merlin cooks some meat that captivates Alice. Merlin says if she works hard, he will give her food. The hungry Alice can't refuse. Suddenly, a shark appears behind her, frightening Alice, but Merlin casually shoos it away. He thinks he is the most dangerous creature in the sea, but she notes that she was talking about the most terrifying predator in the sea. They notice that all the fish around them have suddenly disappeared. Merlin thinks a powerful predator is approaching. A sea monster appears before them. Alice jumps to attack it, but her sword cannot pierce its skin. Merlin tries to recruit the sea monster as a slave, but the monster refuses and sprays water at him. Because of this, Merlin slashes it with a devastating blow and kills it in an instant, and Alice can't believe how powerful he is. They finally reach the shore. Merlin calls Alice a useless slave, and before leaving, he takes Alice's armor, thinking it would be very expensive if sold. Upon her return, Alice is held responsible for the deaths of her comrades. She is stripped of her hero status and ordered to pay 50 million gold coins for losing the precious mithril armor. Meanwhile, Merlin spends all the money he got from selling the armor. Now he is a wanted man for always eating in restaurants without paying, but he thinks everyone should feel honored if he dines at their place instead of calling him a freeloader. A year later, Alice becomes an adventurer and accepts a mission to save the mayor's daughter from pirates. Alice manages to defeat one of the pirates, but the others interfere, causing her to fall. They prepare to attack her, but Merlin suddenly appears and lands on top of them both. Merlin mentions his curse will soon activate, so he immediately slashes them, creating a huge explosion that destroys their ship and the reinforcement ship. Alice cannot see his face, so she considers him a hero and begins to praise him. After that, a reporter named Bella mentions that the Queen considers Merlin a criminal called Nightblade. The next day, Merlin is very hungry, but instead runs into bandits. Knowing there is nothing to take, they ask him to hand over his sword, but he warns them that they will die the moment he takes it out. The bandits laugh at him, and one of them uses his knife to instantly peel an apple. but Merlin uses his sword to cut him into several pieces and takes the apple, while the other bandit turns into a goblin and flees. Merlin then heads towards a nearby village. The goblin reports to its leader that its friend was attacked, using that as a reason to attack humans. After that, Merlin gets into an argument with the owner of a tavern for eating without paying. The owner realizes Merlin is the wanted man who always eats for free and immediately calls people to catch him. But Merlin quickly escapes and meets a small child named Henry. The boy thinks Merlin is putting on a show and will give him money if the show is good. Merlin immediately shows his one-finger sword/technique and asks for the money, but the boy refuses because he is not satisfied and calls Merlin a jobless fraud. Feeling annoyed, Merlin snatches his ice cream and drops it, making the boy cry. After that, Merlin eats at another restaurant and plans to run away, but the owner catches him as he tries to sneak out. She notes that the restroom is in the opposite direction, so he mentions he is looking for a job. He immediately shows off his dancing and singing skills, which impresses the owner, and she decides to hire him, telling him his base pay is 1 gold and he also gets a 15% commission. She introduces herself as Martha and tells him they run 2 shifts. Everything is normal during the day shift, but at night they serve many female customers, of course. She introduces him to her son, Henry, who calls him a freeloader, and she tells Henry to show Merlin to the guest room. Merlin starts working at the inn, and he focuses entirely on the female customers to win their hearts. But the male customers feel insecure because of him. Martha is pleased with his performance because he increased their sales. Meanwhile, Alice arrives in the same village as Merlin with other adventurers. She receives a mission to find a wanted man who always eats for free, but she doesn't know that it's Merlin because she accidentally spilled water on the mission contract. She then separates from the other adventurers and goes to find information. Alice can't find her target, but she suddenly hears Henry hitting a tree and realizes he's angry at a handsome freeloader, so she shows him the poster. Henry notes that it doesn't look like the freeloader he knows, but several men suddenly approach her and offer her a reward if she takes care of Merlin because their women are trapped by his charm. Alice goes to the inn where she is surprised to see a large number of women, as it is just a small town. She sees Merlin and realizes he is the freeloader from her poster. So she decides to catch him, but accidentally gets on stage. And Merlin thinks she also wants to be part of his performance, but they soon find out each other's true identities. So Alice tries to kill him, but he avoids all her attacks. She starts to cry, telling him that she has been living a miserable life after Merlin left her. So the women think Merlin is a terrible person for leaving her. After that, Alice asks Merlin to return her treasure, but Merlin reveals that he has already sold it. Alice realizes that she has to live with her debt of 50 million gold. She explains her situation to him, telling him that she has to get a job in the Adventurers Guild and fight Holy Tier opponents to pay off her debt. But Merlin gets excited, asking how he can become an adventurer. So Alice tells him that he will need a recommendation. He asks for her recommendation because he has always wanted to become an adventurer, but Alice refuses him. Meanwhile, the adventurers are having a hard time defeating the goblins because they didn't expect to fight an entire army. They realize they have no other choice. So they try to escape, but they are captured by the goblin chancellor named Gia. On the other side, Henry is walking around the city when the aforementioned adventurer appears, asking the guards to open the gate, but they are not allowed to open it at night. He says that his friends are dead and he is seriously injured. So they open the gate, but it turns out to be a trap, and the goblins storm the village. He asks Gia to free his fiancée as part of their agreement, but Gia refuses and sends him flying with fire magic. Alice leaves the tavern, annoyed because she can no longer get her reward since no one can capture Merlin. She hears a fight and approaches it. She uses her ice magic to freeze the goblins. Suddenly, a fire attack comes, but Alice manages to parry it. The goblins attack the tavern, but Merlin realizes they are not customers, so he kicks them out. Martha is worried about her son, so she rushes out to find him. He realizes that he won't get paid if something happens to Martha, so he goes to find her while Martha asks everyone if they have seen Henry. A man tells her that he saw Henry near the gate. She calls his name, which attracts the goblins' attention, and they take her away. Henry realizes his mother is in trouble, but he is so scared that he can't move. Meanwhile, Merlin is walking around the village. He meets the goblins and wants to avoid a fight with them because they are so weak that they can't help him with his curse. But they still attack him, so he cuts them into pieces. Gia observes her and thinks Alice won't be able to stop her if she launches a surprise attack, but Alice surprises her with a powerful kick. She tells Gia to leave the village, But Gia refuses and orders the goblins to capture her. But a goblin suddenly falls in front of her and tells her about Merlin. She uses her magic to see how the goblins were killed and realizes that her army is no match for Merlin, so she orders them to retreat. A man named Johnson tries to advertise his services as a personal guard. They all ask him to save the kidnapped people, but he thinks they are already dead. Alice arrives with an adventurer. She tells them that the goblins took the kidnapped people to their cave. Alice explains his fiancée and comrades were captured, so he was forced to work with the goblins. Johnson tries to provoke them to fight him, so Alice kicks him and decides to attack the cave alone. Henry decides to join her, thinking the villagers are all cowards. He goes to get his father's sword, but runs into Merlin instead. Henry tries to leave with the sword, but Merlin tells him to stay home, but he notes that he needs to save his mother. Seeing Henry reminds him of the past, so he decides to save Martha, but he doesn't know where the Goblin Cave is. He hears a group of humans planning to go to the Goblin Cave, so he decides to join them. He volunteers to be their leader, but they think he is not fit to lead them. So he decides to appoint Johnson as their leader. They are happy that Johnson will lead the rescue because they think he is a reliable warrior. Alice sneaks into the cave by distracting the goblins. She frees the prisoners, but she is spotted by the goblins. So she tells Priest to lead everyone out of the cave while she handles them. She quickly defeats them but accidentally enters the king's hall, where she sees the Goblin King waiting for her. Alice realizes the Goblin King is a holy tier fighter, thinking he focuses on brute force, but the Goblin King surprises her with his speed and shatters her ice shield. Merlin and the others finally arrive outside the Goblin Cave, and Johnson starts to shiver in fear. Gia activates her fire barrier and tells them to surrender if they want to live. While Gia continues yapping, Merlin passes through her magic like passing through a waterfall and startles her for not stopping her yapping. Gia then unleashes her ultimate magic Fire Dragon Spin, but Merlin sneezes and reverses her attack, sending all the goblins flying. She wonders if Merlin is a monster, but Merlin just flicks her, which sends her crashing into a mountain. The fire disappears, and Johnson can't believe Merlin was able to defeat Gia. Merlin then enters the cave. Merlin tries to find Martha, but he gets lost in the cave because there are many paths. Then he accidentally meets Priest and the prisoners who are being chased by goblins. Martha pulls his hand, telling him to run immediately, but Merlin instantly slashes all the goblins. Knowing Merlin is very strong, Priest and Martha ask him to help Alice. Martha promises to raise his salary 3 times, so Merlin immediately agrees. Priest warns him not to enter the hall full of gold coins because the Goblin King is there. Merlin rushes off thinking he will become rich. The Goblin King tries to catch Alice, but she jumps back and scratches his arm. Her attack is ineffective. The Goblin King jumps and manages to catch her, but Alice uses the Sky Ice Curse magic to free herself, then launches a combination attack and thinks it's all over. But the Goblin King reveals that he was just pretending to be dead. He heals his wounds and transforms his body before punching her, sending her flying. Meanwhile, Merlin defeated several goblins on his way to the king's hall and blasted open the entrance. But he ignored the king and started looking at all the gold. He cut off the goblin's arm and grabbed Alice. Alice asked about the others, so Merlin told her they were safe. The Goblin King pretended to be hurt and then suddenly regenerated his lost arm. The Goblin King realized Merlin was strong, so he decided to go all out and began to attack him from all directions. But Merlin easily deflected all of his attacks. The Goblin King prepared to use his ultimate technique, the ultimate Goblin Hammer skill, but Merlin easily deflected it. Merlin defeated him with a single slash but forgot to control his attack, so the entire cave started to collapse. He wondered if he should save Alice or grab the treasure, and his conscience reminded him that Alice could refer him to the Adventurers Guild. So, he finally decided to save her. He created an opening to leave the cave, and everyone was glad they made it out alive. Merlin started to cry over the lost treasure while Martha thought he was just worried about Alice. Merlin saw that Alice was badly injured, but he needed her to recommend him to the guild, so he decided to heal her. He covered Alice with his saliva because it has a healing effect on the opposite sex. And as Alice began to heal, she started to dream, and Merlin realized it was because of the saliva. Alice woke up the next morning and everyone rushed to check on her. She didn't remember what happened after she was defeated by the Goblin King, so Priest told her that Merlin was the one who saved her. Alice couldn't believe it, but everyone thanked Alice for saving them, though she mentioned that it was part of her job. Bella interviewed Johnson, who kept yapping, but he became nervous when he saw Merlin. Martha told him that Alice was looking for him, and Merlin thought Alice wanted to thank him. But when he went to her room, Alice suddenly attacked him. She thought Merlin took advantage of her because he took off her clothes, and the priest next door heard strange noises all night. But Merlin explained that it was because of his saliva, which healed her wounds and made her sink into a dream. Alice finally understood the situation and thanked him for saving her. But Merlin mentioned that he lost all the treasure because of her. So Alice agreed to recommend him as an adventurer, but she mentioned that it would make them even. They said goodbye to Martha and Henry and headed to the Adventurers Guild in Wrexham. Meanwhile, the remaining goblins with Gia realized their king was dead, but a woman suddenly appeared before them, and she mentioned that she had obtained the third key to the Legion of Hell. However, so that no one would know, she killed all the goblins. Merlin and Alice arrived at the guild, and he was excited to become an adventurer. He saw the notice board with the available contracts. The receptionist named Lou noticed them, and she wondered if Alice came for another mission. She introduced Merlin, who wanted to become an adventurer, and pulled out Merlin's wanted poster, saying she came for the reward. Merlin was shocked to hear this, but Alice told him that a criminal couldn't become an adventurer. So Lou explained that she would only get 10% of the reward, and after deducting Merlin's debt, she only got 50 gold coins. But Merlin wanted to take it, saying he turned himself in. Lou noted that they had to test his level. A man named Arnold arrived, and he thought Alice was dating Merlin, so he challenged Merlin to a duel, telling him the winner could date Alice. Merlin wasn't interested and immediately surrendered, but Arnold still advanced and attacked Merlin, who sent him flying into the ceiling. Another adventurer named Hobbs told Alice that her boyfriend was as strong as her. A man named Claude suddenly arrived, and everyone fell silent. He checked his power, and the orb revealed that he was a holy tier fighter, shocking everyone. Lou gave him a mithril rank badge. Merlin thought he would shock everyone with his results, and that they would worship him. But the device couldn't measure his power, so Lou told him that he couldn't become an adventurer. Alice wondered if he was hiding his strength, but Merlin mentioned that he indeed had no aura or magic. Merlin challenged the strongest person in the guild to prove his strength. The guild master arrived, saying he couldn't ignore his challenge, and he took him to a hall. The old man told him to go all out and that he would allow him to become an adventurer if he showed potential. So Merlin used his blade strike, which shocked him and damaged everything around them. The adventurers thought their guildmaster went too far, thinking Merlin must be scared to death, but he surprisingly returned unscathed. The guildmaster allowed him to join the guild, and he was so scared that he wet his pants. Merlin came up with a plan to get rich as an adventurer. Merlin thought he didn't need Alice, but he soon ran out of money, and since he had nowhere else to go, he snuck into Alice's house. Alice caught him and thought he was spying on her, but Merlin mentioned that she had nothing worth spying on. But Alice kicked him out, so he started creating a commotion, which grabbed everyone's attention, and they thought Alice kicked out her boyfriend. So Alice brought him inside, asking why he was saying nonsense and ruining her reputation. But Merlin didn't care. Alice took her sword and started attacking him, but he could deflect everything and entered Alice's room. He lay on the bed saying this place was too small for two, so he wrapped Alice in a blanket and made her fall asleep on the floor, while he slept on the bed. The next day, Alice complained of a sore back from sleeping on the floor. Merlin arrived and asked why she didn't wake him up. Lou realized they were living together. Arnold also appeared, and he noted that his duel with Merlin wasn't fair, so they should have another match. But instead of fighting, they should see who could complete an A-rank mission. Merlin was only interested in the pay, not the victory. However, because his rank was still low, Lou explained that he had to be accompanied by another adventurer. He invited Alice, but Arnold also invited her with the offer of a stronger team with Claude. Merlin thought he was the ideal choice, but Alice decided to join Arnold. Everyone felt sorry for Merlin, but he saw a drunk Hobbs and tricked him into forming a team. Hobbs woke up in a carriage and wondered where they were. So Merlin told him about the mission, but he became scared because he was just a mage and Merlin was a rookie. Merlin told Hobbs to stop worrying because he would take care of everything. But Hobbs suddenly saw the Knights of the Duke of Rose. The captain named Carl asked for directions to Denbighshire, so Hobbs told him that he needed to cross the mountain, but they would have to walk because the carriage couldn't pass. But Carl got angry, thinking Hobbs wanted the Duke's daughter Cecilia to walk on such a muddy path. So Merlin wondered if she couldn't walk. Carl wanted to whip him, but Merlin pulled the whip, making Carl fall. Carl was about to attack, but they suddenly saw a stampede of fire rhinos approaching, so Carl ordered his soldiers to protect the carriage. And one of them was about to crash into Carl, but Merlin suddenly lifted it with a single finger, then slammed it down, making the other rhinos scared. Carl thanked Merlin but was still upset with his earlier words. Cecilia came out of the carriage and offered to hire him for 10,000 gold. Hobbs agreed to work for her, but Cecilia said that Hobbs wasn't even worth 5 gold. Merlin said that Cecilia didn't understand his worth, telling her that he would agree to work for her if she paid him 66,000 trillion. So Cecilia left with her men, leaving Merlin behind. Cecilia ordered her men to increase their pace and explained that they had to quickly complete the underground tomb before anyone else, so that her goal of impressing her father could be achieved. Alice was in the carriage with Arnold and Claude. Alice asserted that she didn't care about the bet and liked strong warriors like Nightblade, but Claude thought he was not special. Alice asked him who he thought was the strongest, so Claude told her about the 4 heroes from the previous dynasty. The first were the twin sword experts Zoe and Joey, who defeated the legendary Giant King, then the Dragon Slayer Corona, who killed 7 holy tears in one night. The last was the storm warrior Bernard, who was known as the strongest fighter of the previous empire. Claude thought Nightblade was nothing compared to them, so Alice became upset. But their carriage suddenly stopped as the fire rhinos charged towards them, but Claude instantly destroyed them all. Claude explained they couldn't feel fear, and the only way to stop them was to slaughter them. Merlin was drinking with girls, and they thought he was amazing, but Alice suddenly arrived, telling him to take the mission seriously. They thought Alice was his girlfriend, so they left, and Merlin told her to mind her own business, reminding her that they weren't on the same team. Arnold provided information so their match would be fair. The tomb of the former dynasty's chancellor was in this forest, and grave robbers woke him up. Now he has become an undead mage, controlling corpses and causing trouble, so whoever can kill him will be a hero. Alice was walking in the forest and accidentally saw Claude, so she decided to follow him. A portal opened before him, and he began to talk to his master, who called him Bernard. So Alice realized that he was one of the heroes from the previous dynasty. She tried to leave, but Claude heard her make a sound. And that's the end of this arc. If you want a part 2, comment down below.